History remembers the winners, but cinema is built on failures. In the 1970s, Hollywood gambled big and lost harder than ever before. These films were mocked, ignored, or financially destroyed on release. But time had other plans. Because buried inside box office disasters are masterpieces that refused to die. This is the story of films that bombed loudly, then returned quietly to conquer cult history forever. Number 15, Eraserhead, 1977. Eraserhead did not fail politely. It confused audiences, frightened studio executives, and earned almost nothing during its initial release. Viewers walked out baffled, unsure if they had seen a horror film, an art experiment, or a nightmare accidentally projected onto a screen. There were no clear answers, and that was the problem. Hollywood had no idea what to do with a film that refused explanation. David Lynch created Eraserhead as a deeply personal vision shaped by fear, anxiety, and the dread of adulthood. Shot over several years on a microscopic budget, the film looks unfinished by design. Industrial noises replace music. Faces feel half-formed. Rooms feel alive and hostile. The baby at the center of the story is grotesque, disturbing, and unforgettable. Nothing about the film offers comfort or clarity. Upon release, theaters struggled to market it. Critics dismissed it as pretentious or incomprehensible. It played briefly, disappeared, and looked destined for obscurity. But something strange happened. Midnight screenings began drawing curious audiences. Word spread quietly. People returned again and again, trying to decode its meaning. What once felt alien slowly became hypnotic. Over time, Eraserhead transformed into a rite of passage for underground film culture. It spoke to fears no mainstream movie would acknowledge. Parenthood, isolation, identity, and suffocating responsibility are all embedded beneath its surreal imagery. Lynch never explained it and never needed to. The film invited interpretation rather than instruction. Today, Eraserhead is considered one of the most influential independent films ever made. It launched Lynch's career, reshaped experimental cinema, and proved that box office numbers mean nothing when a film connects on a subconscious level. What once failed financially succeeded artistically in a way few films ever have. Number 14. Johnny Got His Gun, 1971. Johnny Got His Gun arrived at the worst possible moment. America was exhausted by war imagery and divided by Vietnam. Audiences wanted escapism, not confrontation. What they received instead was one of the most brutal anti-war films ever made. The result was commercial disaster. The film follows a young soldier who survives a battlefield explosion but loses his arms, legs, face, and ability to communicate. Trapped inside his own body, he is conscious, aware, and screaming silently. There are no heroic speeches, no triumphant moments, only endless isolation and psychological torture. Audiences were unprepared for its honesty. Studios did not know how to market a film with no traditional structure and no comforting message. The movie was quickly pulled from theaters and largely forgotten by mainstream culture, but its power never faded. As years passed, the film found new life through underground screenings, classrooms, and anti-war movements. Its message aged with terrifying relevance. Johnny became a symbol not of bravery, but of consequence. The cost of war stripped bare of glory. Metallica later used clips from the film in their song One, introducing it to a new generation. Interest surged. Reappraisals followed. Critics acknowledged what audiences once rejected. Johnny Got His Gun was not too bleak, it was too honest. Today, it stands as one of the most uncompromising anti-war statements ever filmed. Its initial failure only proves how unwilling audiences were to confront reality. Time did what ticket sales could not. It recognized the film's courage. Number 13. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. A Boy and His Dog was doomed the moment it was released. Too strange for mainstream science fiction, too dark for comedy, and too cynical for hope-driven post-apocalypse stories. Audiences rejected it immediately. Critics were divided. The box office collapse was swift. Set in a scorched future, the film follows a teenage scavenger and his telepathic dog as they wander a ruined America searching for food, sex, and survival. There is no heroism, no noble cause, only hunger, selfishness, and moral decay. Even the humor is cruel by design. At the time, science fiction leaned toward optimism or spectacle. This film offered neither. Its tone was abrasive, its ending shocking, and its worldview merciless. Viewers walked away offended or confused. Studios quietly moved on, but cult audiences did not. Over time, fans began appreciating the film's refusal to lie. It presented a future stripped of romance and false morality. The talking dog became iconic. The film's influence quietly spread into later dystopian cinema. What once seemed offensive now feels prophetic. Themes of survival, ethics, power, and exploitation resonate deeply with modern audiences. The film's low-budget rough edges now enhance its authenticity. A Boy and His Dog did not succeed because it was pleasant. It survived because it was fearless. Time rewarded its honesty and punished the expectations that once buried it. Number 12. Night Moves, 1975. Night Moves arrived quietly and vanished just as fast. Audiences expected a conventional detective story led by a familiar star. What they received instead was something slower, colder, and far more unsettling. The film rejected easy answers and punished anyone looking for a clean mystery. At the box office, it failed without drama and slipped into obscurity. Gene Hackman plays a private investigator already tired of truth. His case appears simple, but slowly unravels into layers of betrayal, confusion, and moral exhaustion. Every discovery leads not to clarity, but to deeper disillusionment. The pacing is deliberate and heavy. Silence matters more than action. Violence arrives suddenly and without relief. In the 1970s, audiences were trained by faster thrillers. This film refused momentum. It focused on emotional rot rather than plot mechanics. Critics were unsure how to respond. Viewers left unsatisfied. The studio moved on quickly. Years later, Night Moves began to resurface through late-night broadcasts and home video. Viewers older and more patient discovered its power. The film was not about solving a crime. It was about the impossibility of truth. The ending offered no victory, only acceptance. Hackman's performance gained new respect. His quiet frustration mirrored a generation losing faith in institutions, justice, and certainty. The film captured that mood with precision. Today, Night Moves is considered one of the great neo-noir tragedies. Its failure was never artistic. It was temporal. The film demanded maturity audiences did not yet possess. Time gave it what theaters could not, understanding. Number 11. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975. The Rocky Horror Picture Show collapsed immediately. Theaters were empty. Reviews were harsh. Studios had no idea how to market a film that mocked genre, gender, and narrative structure all at once. It looked like a disaster destined for quick burial. The film blended horror, science fiction, musical, and satire into something deliberately unclassifiable. Songs exploded without warning. Characters ignored realism. Sexual identity became fluid and joyful. For mainstream audiences, this was chaos. Confusion turned into rejection. The initial release ended quickly, but then something unexpected happened. Midnight screenings began. Small crowds formed. Fans returned repeatedly. Participation became ritual. Costumes, callbacks, and shared rebellion transformed the experience. The movie stopped being a film and became a gathering. Viewers were no longer passive. They were part of it. What once seemed embarrassing now felt liberating. Rocky Horror offered a safe space for outsiders long before culture caught up. The box office numbers changed slowly, then permanently. Decades passed. The film never left theaters. New generations inherited the tradition. What failed as a commercial product succeeded as a cultural movement. Today, the Rocky Horror Picture Show holds the longest theatrical run in history. Its early failure feels irrelevant. The film did not need approval, it needed time and community. Both arrived eventually and never left. Number 10. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre terrified distributors before it ever scared audiences. It looked too real, too dirty, and too cruel. Many theaters refused to book it. Those that did faced walkouts, outrage, and protests. Financial success was slow and uncertain. Shot on a tiny budget, the film feels like documentary footage of madness. There is no polish. The violence feels unavoidable. The heat, exhaustion, and screaming never let up. Viewers believed they were watching something forbidden. Critics dismissed it as exploitation. Moral panic followed. The film struggled for legitimacy, but audiences remembered it. The imagery burned itself into memory. Over time, the reputation changed. Filmmakers praised its restraint and craftsmanship. The violence was suggested, not shown. Fear came from atmosphere and dread. Leatherface became an icon. The farmhouse became a nightmare symbol. The film influenced generations of horror creators. What once seemed crude became essential. Its early rejection reflected discomfort, not quality. Today, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is regarded as one of the most important horror films ever made. Its box office struggle only highlights how dangerous it felt. Some films fail because they are weak. Others fail because they are too powerful. Number 9. Zardoz, 1974. Zardoz was released into confusion and ridicule. Audiences expected epic science fiction led by a major star. What they encountered instead was a philosophical nightmare dressed as spectacle. The box office collapse was immediate and brutal. Viewers laughed, critics attacked, and studios distanced themselves. The story unfolds in a strange future divided between immortals and brutal survivors. Sean Connery appears almost unrecognizable, wearing an outfit that became infamous. A floating stone head delivers cryptic commandments. Violent sex and abstract ideas collide without explanation or comfort. The film refuses to guide the viewer. At the time, science fiction relied on clarity and heroism. Zardoz rejected both. Its ideas about control, stagnation, immortality, and decay were buried beneath imagery audiences could not process. The result was rejection, not reflection. Years later, the tone changed. Viewers returned with curiosity rather than expectation. What once looked ridiculous now felt bold. Beneath the strange visuals was a serious meditation on power and eternal boredom. The film dared to ask what happens when humanity escapes death but loses purpose. Filmmakers, scholars, and cult audiences began to defend it. Its influence became visible in later dystopian cinema. The very elements once mocked became its signature strength. Zardoz did not fail because it lacked vision. It failed because it arrived too early and spoke too strangely. Today, it stands as a cult landmark. A reminder that ambition often looks foolish before it looks prophetic. Zardoz survived because it refused to compromise. Time rewarded its madness with meaning. Number 8. The Friends of Eddie Coyle, 1973. The Friends of Eddie Coyle disappeared almost unnoticed. There were no explosions, no glamour, and no heroic criminals. Audiences expected a crime thriller and received something quieter and far more depressing. The box office response was minimal. The film follows a low-level gun runner trapped between criminals and law enforcement. There is no escape, only delay. Conversations unfold slowly and casually. Violence arrives suddenly and without ceremony. Every character feels tired and compromised. In the early 1970s, crime films often romanticized outlaw culture. This film stripped it bare. There were no legends, only losers. Critics admired it, but audiences stayed away. It felt too close to reality. Over time, its honesty became its strength. Viewers recognized the precision of its world. The dialogue felt real. The betrayals felt inevitable. Robert Mitchum delivered one of his most restrained performances. His Eddie Coyle is not evil, he is simply worn down. The film gained respect through rediscovery. Crime writers praised its realism. Filmmakers cited its influence. What once felt bleak now felt truthful. Today, The Friends of Eddie Coyle is considered one of the greatest crime films ever made. Its failure proved how uncomfortable honesty can be. It did not entertain. It observed. Time rewarded that patience. Number 7, The Long Goodbye, 1973. The Long Goodbye baffled audiences on release. Viewers expected a classic detective story. What they received was a dismantling of the genre itself. The box office numbers reflected that confusion. Robert Altman transformed Raymond Chandler's hero into a man out of time. Philip Marlowe wanders through a modern world that no longer respects loyalty or honor. He survives not through brilliance, but stubborn decency. The pacing drifts. The tone feels detached. Audiences were not ready. The film mocked tradition rather than celebrating it. Critics were divided. Studios quietly moved on. Years later, appreciation grew. The film was recognized as a commentary on lost values. Elliot Gould's performance gained admiration. The ending shocked with its moral clarity. The Long Goodbye became a cult classic because it understood change. It mourned the past without romanticizing it. Its early failure was inevitable. Its survival was deserved. Number 6, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, 1974. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia was rejected on sight. Critics attacked it, audiences avoided it, and studios quickly labeled it a failure. The film felt mean, ugly, and exhausting. It offered no heroes and no relief. The box office collapse was immediate and decisive. The story follows a broken man dragged into a violent mission across Mexico. His task is grotesque and symbolic. Retrieve proof of a murder for powerful men who do not care who dies along the way. Every step of the journey strips away dignity, hope, and illusion. Violence is not exciting, it is inevitable. Director Sam Peckinpah poured his own despair into the film. The tone is soaked in bitterness. Characters drink, fight, and suffer without escape. Love exists only briefly before being destroyed. Audiences expecting action spectacle were confronted with emotional rot instead. Upon release, the film was called self-indulgent and cruel. Peckinpah's career suffered. The movie vanished from theaters. It looked like a cautionary tale about excess and failure. Years later, the reevaluation began. Viewers saw honesty where others saw ugliness. The film was not glorifying violence. It was mourning it. The brutality carried weight. The nihilism reflected a world losing faith. Cult audiences embraced it as Peckinpah's purest statement, a funeral march for the American anti-hero. Its influence spread quietly through later cinema. Today, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia is regarded as a masterpiece of despair. Its failure was commercial only. Artistically, it survived because it refused comfort. Some films are rejected because they tell truths audiences are not ready to face. Number 5. The Last Movie, 1971. The Last Movie collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. Audiences were confused, critics were hostile, and studios panicked. The film disappeared almost immediately, leaving behind anger and misunderstanding. Its box office failure was swift and total. Dennis Hopper created a film about filmmaking itself. Set in a Peruvian village, the story follows a stuntman haunted by the artificial violence he once created. Reality and illusion bleed together. The villagers rebuild movie scenes believing them to be real. Meaning dissolves. There is no traditional structure. Scenes repeat, distort, and fracture. The film refuses clarity. Viewers searching for narrative coherence found only chaos. At the time, this felt like arrogance, not art. The backlash was severe. Hopper was labeled uncontrollable. The film became infamous. It was buried and rarely screened. For years, it existed only as a cautionary legend. Time changed the conversation. The Last Movie began to look prophetic. Its ideas about cultural exploitation, colonial influence, and cinematic myth felt ahead of their era. What once felt indulgent now felt critical. Restorations and re-screenings revealed craftsmanship beneath the disorder. The film asked uncomfortable questions about violence, fantasy, and responsibility. It demanded participation rather than consumption. Today, the last movie is recognized as a bold experiment that failed commercially because it challenged its audience too directly. It did not want to entertain. It wanted to confront. History finally listened. Number 4. THX 1138 Sext Pryout 1971. THX 1138 failed quietly. Audiences expected science fiction excitement and received sterile repression instead. The film felt cold, distant, and unsettling. Ticket sales reflected the discomfort. Set in a future without emotion or privacy, the story follows a man punished for wanting freedom, love, and individuality. The world is white-controlled and monitored. Human connection is illegal. Escape is nearly impossible. George Lucas directed the film with precision and restraint. Dialogue is minimal. Spaces feel empty. Authority is faceless. The lack of warmth alienated viewers. Critics admired its ambition, but audiences stayed away. The studio struggled to sell it. There were no heroes, no spectacle, and no comfort. The film vanished quickly. It seemed like a misstep destined to be forgotten. Decades later, re-evaluation transformed its reputation. Viewers recognized its influence. Themes of surveillance control and dehumanization became frighteningly relevant. The design inspired generations of filmmakers. THX 1138 became a cult cornerstone. Its failure proved that subtle science fiction often arrives too early. What once felt distant became prophetic. Today, it stands as a foundational dystopian film. A quiet warning disguised as failure. Time revealed its power. Number 3. Zabriskie Point, 1970. Zabriskie Point collapsed on arrival. Critics dismissed it, audiences rejected it, and studios quietly walked away. The film arrived during cultural upheaval, but spoke in a language few wanted to hear. Its box office failure was decisive and humiliating. Directed by Michelangelo Antonioni, the film follows two young outsiders drifting through a fractured America. One flees political persecution, the other escapes emotional emptiness. Their journey leads to the desert, where isolation strips away identity and ideology. The story is minimal. The meaning is not. Audiences expected rebellion energy and clear politics. What they received instead was detachment, silence, and ambiguity. The film refused slogans. It rejected easy anger. Characters drift rather than fight. For viewers craving momentum, this felt alienating. Critics accused the film of emptiness. Executives panicked. The movie disappeared almost instantly. It became shorthand for artistic failure and cultural miscalculation. Time changed everything. As decades passed, Zabriskie Point was re-examined through distance rather than expectation. Its images gained power. The desert sequences felt hypnotic. The infamous explosion finale transformed into a haunting metaphor for consumer excess and spiritual collapse. The soundtrack featuring Pink Floyd and others deepened its mood. The film captured a generation not through noise, but through exhaustion. Its refusal to shout became its strength. Today, Zabriskie Point is recognized as a bold cinematic meditation on alienation, capitalism, and youth disillusionment. Its failure was commercial, not conceptual. It spoke too quietly during an era of shouting. History finally learned how to listen. Number 2. Sorcerer, 1977. Sorcerer arrived with impossible expectations and collapsed under their weight. Audiences expected a blockbuster adventure. What they received was a slow, punishing descent into fear, sweat, and desperation. The box office failure was immediate and devastating. The film opened just weeks after Star Wars and vanished in its shadow. Directed by William Friedkin at the height of his power, Sorcerer tells the story of four men hiding from their pasts. Criminals, fugitives, and outcasts are forced into a suicide mission transporting unstable explosives through a jungle where roads dissolve and machines betray their operators. Survival is never guaranteed. Hope barely exists. The film is relentless. Dialogue is sparse. Tension builds without release. The famous bridge sequence does not thrill. It suffocates. Every movement feels fatal. Audiences conditioned for spectacle and victory found only dread and exhaustion. Critics misunderstood its intent. Studios lost faith. Marketing failed completely. The title confused viewers. The tone repelled casual audiences. The film disappeared, quickly branded as a financial disaster. Years later, reevaluation transformed Sorcerer into a legend. Filmmakers praised its craftsmanship. Its sound design, cinematography, and pacing were recognized as masterful. The film became a study in sustained tension unmatched by modern cinema. What once felt bleak now feels honest. Sorcerer refuses heroism. It treats survival as punishment rather than reward. Its influence can be seen across decades of thriller filmmaking. Today, Sorcerer is considered one of the greatest suspense films ever made. Its failure was circumstantial, not creative. Time restored its reputation and revealed its power. Number 1. Heaven's Gate, 1980. Heaven's Gate did not just fail, it detonated. Budget overruns, production chaos, and critical hostility turned it into legend before release. When it finally reached theaters, the damage was done. The box office collapse was catastrophic. The film attempted to portray immigrant conflict, corporate power, and historical violence with operatic scale. Director Michael Cimino pursued authenticity obsessively. Sets were rebuilt, scenes reshot, and time ignored. Studios lost patience. Audiences were overwhelmed. The pacing was slow, the tone mournful. Critics attacked mercilessly. United Artists nearly collapsed. The film was pulled and recut. Its reputation became synonymous with excess. For decades, Heaven's Gate was mocked without being seen. Then restorations emerged. Viewers finally experienced the original vision. The reaction changed. What once felt bloated now felt immersive. The cinematography was stunning. The themes were relevant. Violence was contextual, not sensational. The film mourned lost ideals and crushed communities. Heaven's Gate became a cult masterpiece because it refused compromise. Its failure reshaped Hollywood, but its art survived. Sometimes a bomb leaves a crater. Sometimes it leaves a monument. These films did not fail because they were weak. They failed because they were early, bold, and unforgiving. Time stripped away expectations and revealed their power. Box office numbers fade. Vision endures. And sometimes the loudest failures leave the deepest marks on cinema history.